Hello and welcome to this episode of Hampton Roads Business Live. Today my guest is Virginia Welch. She is an author here, a local author, right here in Hampton Roads. Welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you start off with, let's just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I live in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
I'm married with 4 children. I work full-time as a writer and an editor with an international defense contractor in Chesapeake.
Okay, and so you write for a living then?
Yes, I do. I write for a living, full-time.
Okay. And I assume that it's promotional writing or something like that.
It is. It's called proposals, but
Right.
essentially it's marketing writing.
Right, marketing writing. Okay, well I do a little bit of marketing writing too, so I know that can be challenging.
Yes.
Okay, and now you are an author, and I know a lot of people, including myself, have said, you know, I've had an idea for a book, you know, and you actually took that, I have an idea for a book, or I feel like I would like to write a book, and you've actually done it. What inspired you to actually take on the challenge of writing a book?
I thought about it for a long time.
Yeah. A lot of us do.
I thought about it for a long time. You know, well, what kept me from writing, from actually sitting down to write the book is I didn't really see myself as a writer, even though I was being paid to write. For a long time, writing was just my job. But I had a story that I had in the back of my mind for many years, and my friends urged me to write it down. But I kept thinking, well, I'm not a fiction writer. And this is outside my genre. But over time, as my writing developed, and it should develop over time, I developed the confidence to begin the first book.
I see. Okay, and now you say this story percolated for a long time.
Yes, it did.
Okay, all right. And so, was your writing is your writing style one where you sit down and just write like crazy, and just continue to do it, or does it come in short bursts?
It comes in short bursts, and I really do try to find time to sit down for a long period. Doesn't happen often.
Right. Well, I've read in some writers will tell you that the best thing that you can do is just to write, and you
Yes.
write every day.
That
you
is
write.
true. Absolutely, it is true. Even if you feel like you have nothing to write.
You sit and write every day.
I sit and write. Yes, I force myself.
Okay. Well, that's probably why I haven't written the book.
That's probably.
That's probably why most people haven't written
Yes.
the book. Okay. All right. One of the questions I was going to ask, and we had talked prior to this interview, was when did you consider yourself a writer?
That's a very good question. In 2003, the summer of 2003, I decided kind of on a lark to attend a Christian Writers Conference at the Cove, which is Billy Graham's conference center outside Asheville, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never done anything like that. I spent 3 days listening to speakers, going to workshops, spent some time in prayer. And when I came back, I knew that I was called to write. And it didn't matter whether I was published or not. I knew that this was what I was meant to do. And it was at that point my whole life changed.
Okay. And in talking to you prior to this interview, and I could see it when you were just talking right there, is that when you talk about writing, you really you can hear the passion in your voice, and you really like writing.
I love writing.
Yeah. So okay, and so your first book. Let's talk about that. The first book that you did is called The Lesson.
Yes.
And I'll hold that up, and we don't have any trouble with the lighting here.
No.
But anyway, The Lesson. And tell us a little bit about that book. It's a fiction book, but it is based on a true story, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The Lesson is the book that's closest to my heart, Rory.
Okay.
The reason that I finally got writing on that book is I had a lot of friends who kept saying, you need to write your story down. It is my story. Mm-hmm. In 1975, I was a sophomore in college. I was madly in love with a young man whom I will call Mr. Suave Attorney. And we were engaged. And during a short period of a spring break that year, the gentleman dumped me. And shortly after that, I was followed home from an evening meeting by a total stranger, whom I will call Mr. Polyester Pants. Anyway, the lesson is how I fell in love with Mr. Polyester Pants. And I wasn't going to write it because I had worked as a journalist for years, newspaper, and I was a book editor, and I just did not think of myself as a fiction writer. But you know how couples are out to dinner or whatever, and someone says, "How did you meet your spouse?" So I would tell my story. Everybody would laugh, and, "Oh, that's great, you need to write it down." And I would just ignore what they said. And then one day around 2005, it dawned on me this really was the stuff of story. I also thought it'd be nice to record how I met my husband for the sake of my grandchildren.
And how does your husband feel about being called Mr. Polyester Pants?
Well, I have to say, I was a little afraid to put the book in front of him. He sat down and read it in 2 sittings, and he said he loved it.
That's good.
He's an easygoing guy. And
Oh, that's good.
he doesn't care.
He doesn't care. Okay, that's good. All right. There is a message in this book.
Yes,
You
very
want to tell
much
us
so.
tell us about that message?
The message of the lesson is that God, if you give your life to God, you know, as Christians do, we say we have given our lives to God. God truly does take control of your life, and you can trust Him. Even when things are going on around you that are very hurtful and very confusing, like when I was being pursued by Mr. Polyester Pants, was brokenhearted over Mr. Suave Attorney, couldn't understand why God didn't bring me somebody dashing into my life to replace Mr. Suave Attorney. As a matter of fact, on the day that the lesson was supposed to go public, my 4th child died in a car accident. That was Valentine's Day this year. I was literally sitting at my computer uploading the manuscript for the lesson to Amazon when the police came to the door. For me personally, the lesson is like a crucible of my faith. It's almost as if God is saying, are you going to continue to speak to people, and do you really believe that I'm in control? And I say, yes, He is.
I know that's interesting. How much of this book is true? I mean, it's a fiction book, but it's
Yes.
based on your story.
Yes.
So is it one of those things where it's actually true? You just change the names?
Not exactly. I would say about 75% of the material in the book is absolutely based on a particular scene from my memory of my life. Some people in the book who are named, or usually briefly, are actual people. And other people are, I had to change, you know, how they look and their names and the settings and a few places to hide their identities. But yes, the majority of the book is true.
Okay, so you find the message in the book is was particularly effective for your life.
It is now.
Yeah. Okay.
Ever more so.
All right. Now this book came out
That came out the first week of March.
in March. Okay, and this was it is. We're going to talk about how the people can get these books, but
Yes.
it's on Amazon and
Yes, it is.
and all. Okay, all right. Now this book was written before that, or had been written for over a long period of time.
I started the lesson in 2005, and I believe I finished it in 2006.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then it was followed by this one, which
Yes.
this one is called Crazy Woman Creek.
Crazy Woman Creek.
Interesting title, and this one is also a fiction book.
Yes, it is.
And I assume that's not about you, right?
No.
Okay, good. Okay, but what I found interesting about this is it's a Western, is it
It
not?
is.
Okay.
It's a historical romance.
All right. Usually writers, I mean, they write on a particular topic.
Yes.
And they may change the setting or whatever. You're going from one place to a Western atmosphere.
know.
What kind of inspired you to go with a Western?
A couple of things, actually. I love Western romance. It's very difficult to, even if you find a really well-written one, it's hard to find one that don't have a lot of graphic sex, which I simply will not read. So I'm always down at the library looking on the stacks for another good Western romance. So after I had written the lesson, I was very, very happy with the way it came out. I thought, well, you know what? I'm gonna write a Western romance, but I already had an idea in my mind. In 1999, I was crossing the country by car. I had my 4 children with me. We were supposed to meet my husband in Virginia. we were in Wyoming, and I'm going along the highway, and all of a sudden there's this road sign, Crazy Woman Creek, and we're going over this small body of water. And I thought, Crazy Woman Creek? Why in the world would anyone name a body of water Crazy Woman Creek? So when we got home to Virginia, I went online. This is 1999. The internet was still in its infancy. And there really wasn't that much material about Crazy Woman Creek. And really, no one actually knows for sure how this body of water, it's all in the northeastern corner of Wyoming. Mm-hmm. No one really knows how it got its name. So when I made up in my mind that I was going to write a Western romance, the first thing I thought of was Crazy Woman Creek. Mm-hmm. I actually flew out there and did research in the environs. It's just beautiful. It's right outside the little town of Buffalo, Wyoming.
All right, and how long did that one take to write?
That took a whole year.
A whole year, okay. All right, now that one is also available.
It is. It's available on Amazon.com.
And I hear it's doing well.
It's doing very well, actually,
Well, that's
yes.
good. Well, congratulations, that's good. Now, is this one have a central message too?
Yes, the central message of Crazy Woman Creek is that you have to live according to the truth in your heart, what you know to be true, no matter what is going on around you.
Okay, well that sounds like a pretty good universal message.
Yes,
yeah.
Very much.
Right. And actually, when we talked, you were telling me that that you should write regardless of what other people are telling you, and if you feel that that's what you need to do, that kind of goes with that message?
Yes, you're a writer if you write, not because a publisher has picked you up.
Right, right. It's kind of like ignore the critics.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So if they could write, they wouldn't be critics. Okay. All right. So and your most recent book is this one here, and this is I thought Crazy Woman Creek was an intriguing title, but this one is What to Do When the Blessings Stop, When God Sends Famine.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't sound like the feel-good book of the year.
No, that is not a feel-good book.
Okay,
and has a feel-good ending.
Right, and this is not a fiction book.
No,
this is your first nonfiction.
It is my
book.
first nonfiction.
All right, so tell us, what is this based on then?
What to Do When the Blessings Stopped is a contemporary study of the book of Haggai. It's obviously the shortest of the books. It's only about 100 pages. In Haggai, the Jews had abandoned the calling that God had given them, which was to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, put the city back together after it had been destroyed under after the Babylonian king had come in and taken the Jews captive. And so this little contingent of Jews had gone back to Jerusalem, and God had given them a task. They got lazy, they got indifferent, but the number one thing that they did is they had put the work of their own fields and their own ranches above the work of God. So God had sent famine into their lives. And then Haggai came and pointed this out to them and gave them steps how to break the famine off their lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this one also is available through...
Oh yes, paperback and downloadable.
So it sounds like you've got quite a spread there of different topics and things. Who are some authors that inspired you? I mean, what inspired you to be...
There have been many inspiring authors. As a child, I was completely in love with the Little House books. Laura Ingalls Wilder, I'm sure you've heard of those. Definitely influenced my life. As a high schooler, I was greatly influenced by Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. Simple little book, but he was such an overcomer. In fact, all of my heroines tend to be overcomers. They have this mighty problem, and they learn to overcome. And I suspect it's because
makes for a good story.
It does make for a good story, but I admire people who are overcomers. And most recently, for romance inspiration, there is a book. It's a historical romance. It's set in Richmond, actually, in the Civil War. It's written by Mary Schaller. It's called Beloved Enemy. It was just absolutely one of the most gripping romances I've ever read, and it was clean. I loved it. I've read it like 3 times.
Okay, well that's interesting. That you have varied writing topics, and of course you just said several different authors that you read, and they're all different,
All
quite
very
different.
different.
Yeah, all very different. So, do you get anything? Do you learn anything from writing the books? Sometimes
yes.
I would assume that you come to some realizations about yourself or whatever as you're investigating or as you're writing and going into a topic. So, did you get anything out of writing these books?
Yes, I did. I have the greatest admiration for people who write a best-selling book.
Yeah.
When you write a book and it gets up on Amazon, you start getting reviews, and you may not always like what people say about your work. There's this old cliche, you have to believe in yourself. Well, let me tell you what, you have to believe in yourself. You have to really believe in the message that you're putting forth, because you're not always going to get glowing reviews for your work.
Right. And was there something about this that was harder than you thought it was going to be?
Yes. Writing fiction is hugely harder than I thought it would be. In fact, I did not actually sit down to write Crazy Woman Creek until I'd done 2 years of study on writing fiction. And that's when I learned how a good book doesn't just get thrown on the page. It has to be plotted. You have to have an engine that starts in the first chapter. You have to have well-developed characters. You have to have a satisfying romance. You have to have a good, satisfying ending. You have to have a moral or some type of thematic message. I mean, it's a very complicated, it's like a movie. A good movie doesn't just sort of fall together. It's very intentional. So is good fiction.
Well, very few movies seem to fall together very
Yes.
well. So, okay. So, do you have advice for people who want to be writers, besides write every day? I mean, if you think, well, you know what, I've had this idea for a book. I think I'm gonna, I'd love to write it. There's a joke about the guy that said, listen to a piano player, and he's playing this great piano player. And the guy says, boy, I'd give anything to do that. And the guy said, well, I gave 8 hours a day. And so most people are not willing to do that. So when you're saying, I'd like to write, or somebody that's actually serious about it, what advice do you have for that? No.
I have 2 pieces of advice. One's inspirational and one's pragmatic.
Okay.
The pragmatic, outline your book before you start writing. It'll give you a roadmap. And you won't be looking at a computer screen thinking, what do I write?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, get at it. Don't keep saying, I'm going to write a book someday. Sit down and write.
Now, do you use do you use Word or something
Yes,
to
I
write?
use Word.
Okay, so you're not using a writing software like New Novelist or something? Okay,
Never,
so
no.
you use Word.
Yeah.
So you just start with a blank page?
I start with an idea,
Right.
and then I start brainstorming scenes, because a book really is a set of
Right.
scenes. I'm working on one right now.
And characters?
Yes.
And character
Yes.
development, yeah. So that's interesting. Okay, and so the main thing is to get at it and to write every day.
Quit talking about it and do it.
Okay, all right. All right, so I guess, is there something else about these books that you'd like to say before we talk about how people can find them?
I really hope to make a difference in someone's life. I hope the fiction entertains and uplifts. I hope the nonfiction informs and gives hope.
And there's a message throughout all 3, actually.
God is in control of your life.
Yeah, okay. All right, good to know.
Amen.
All right, so now tell people how they can find your books.
The books can be found at my website, which is GinnyWelch.com. They can also be found at Amazon.com in downloadable format and paperback. And you can buy paperbacks at BarnesandNoble.com.
Okay, and so the 3 books again are The Lesson, Crazy Woman Creek, you won't forget that one, and What to Do When the Blessings Stop When God Sends Famine. Okay, so I wish you the best of luck. It sounds like you're well on your way.
Thank you, Rory.
And the contact information for Virginia's books and her website are at the bottom of this page and at the end of this video. So if you'd like to be inspired and maybe learn a lesson or 2 in the process and be entertained, give her books a chance. You can find them at Amazon and on BarnesandNoble.com.
BarnesandNoble.com.
And it'll be a good read for the summer. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Rory.
All right.
Appreciate it.